The blizzard hit Wyoming Territory like God's own wrath, turning the landscape into a whirling white nightmare that devoured everything in its path. And Eleanor Sutton knew with bone-deep certainty that she would die out here in this frozen wasteland if she did not find shelter within the hour. Her mare stumbled again beneath her, exhausted and trembling, breathing in ragged gasps that sent plumes of steam into the howling wind. Eleanor could barely see 3 feet ahead through the wall of snow, her fingers numb inside her gloves, her face burning from the cold despite the scarf wrapped around it. She had been riding for what felt like days, but was probably only hours, having left Laramie that morning with clear skies and foolish confidence that she could reach the trading post 20 miles north before nightfall. The storm had rolled in from nowhere, a white monster that swallowed the sun and turned afternoon into twilight. Eleanor had tried to turn back, but within minutes she had lost all sense of direction. North, south, east, west meant nothing when the world was nothing but white chaos and screaming wind. Her mare whinnied in distress, and Eleanor patted her neck with a hand she could barely feel. "Just a little further, Molly. Please, just a little further." She knew it was a lie. There was no shelter out here on the open prairie. She had made a terrible mistake leaving town alone, ignoring the warnings of the old-timers who claimed they could smell snow coming. Her stubbornness was going to kill her, and she was only 23 years old with so much life still unlived. Then through the swirling snow, Eleanor saw something, a shape, dark and solid against the white. She blinked hard, certain it was a hallucination, her mind conjuring hope where there was none. But the shape remained. A building. A cabin, small and squat, with smoke rising from its chimney only to be snatched away by the wind. Eleanor urged Molly forward, using the last reserves of both their strengths to push through the deepening drifts. The cabin grew more solid, more real with each agonizing step. It was built of rough-hewn logs, weathered gray by sun and wind, with a small barn attached to one side. Light glowed in the single window, warm and golden and impossibly beautiful. Eleanor half fell from the saddle when they reached the cabin door, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. She caught herself against the rough wood wall and pounded on the door with her fist, then again harder when her first attempt made barely any sound over the wind. The door swung open and warmth rushed out, along with the smell of wood smoke and coffee. A man stood silhouetted against the firelight, tall and broad-shouldered, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then he spoke, his voice deep and rough like gravel shifting. "I have been waiting." Eleanor stared at him through the snow, caking her eyelashes, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Come inside before you freeze to death." He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Your horse, too. Bring her around to the barn. I will meet you there." He disappeared back into the cabin, and Eleanor stood stupefied for a moment before her survival instinct kicked in. She gathered Molly's reins and led the exhausted mare around the side of the cabin where she found the barn door already open, the man standing inside with a lantern held high. The barn was small but sturdy, with 2 stalls and a hayloft above. Only one stall was occupied by a big roan gelding who looked up with mild interest at the new arrivals. The man took Molly's reins from Eleanor's frozen fingers and led the mare into the empty stall with practiced ease. "Get inside, warm up by the fire," he told Eleanor without looking at her. "I will tend to your horse." Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to help, but her body was past the point of cooperation. She stumbled back out into the storm and around to the cabin door, pushing inside and shutting it against the wind that tried to follow her in. The cabin was a single room, sparse but clean. A bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, a wood stove radiating blessed heat, and a fireplace with a pot of something hanging over the flames. Eleanor stood dripping melted snow onto the rough plank floor, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The door opened and the man came in, bringing a gust of cold air and snow with him. He shut the door firmly and turned to look at Eleanor properly for the first time. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was weathered and lean, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of beard. He wore a simple homespun shirt and canvas pants, both well worn but clean. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, his tone matter of fact. "There are blankets on the bed. I will turn my back." Eleanor nodded, still shaking too hard to speak. The man turned to face the wall and Eleanor forced her numb fingers to work on the buttons of her coat. It took forever, her hands clumsy and uncooperative, but finally she peeled off the wet layers down to her chemise and drawers. She wrapped herself in the thick wool blankets from the bed, their warmth making her gasp. "All right," she managed to say through chattering teeth. The man turned around and nodded. "Sit by the fire. I will make you something hot to drink." Eleanor sank into one of the chairs near the fireplace, holding her hands out to the flames. The man moved around the small cabin with quiet efficiency, adding wood to both the fire and the stove, checking the pot hanging over the flames, pouring coffee from a battered pot into a tin cup. He brought the cup to Eleanor and pressed it into her hands. "Drink this slowly. Too fast and you will make yourself sick." The coffee was strong and bitter and absolutely perfect. Eleanor sipped it carefully, feeling warmth spread through her chest and belly. Her shaking began to ease, though her fingers and toes still burned with the ache of returning circulation. The man pulled the other chair over and sat down across from her, studying her face with those gray eyes. "What were you doing out in this storm alone?" "I was not alone when I started," Eleanor said. Her voice came out hoarse and rough. "I left Laramie this morning. The weather was clear. I thought I could make it to the trading post before dark. The trading post burned down 3 months ago." Eleanor closed her eyes. Of course it had. Her trip had been for nothing from the start. "I did not know. I just arrived in Laramie 2 weeks ago." "From where?" "Boston, originally." Eleanor took another sip of coffee. "My aunt lived in Laramie. She died and left me her boarding house. I came west to claim it." The man nodded slowly. "That would be Martha Sutton's place. I heard she passed last fall. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Eleanor looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You said something strange when you opened the door. You said you had been waiting. What did you mean by that?" For a long moment the man did not answer. He stared into the fire, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "For 3 years I have lived in this cabin alone. For 3 years I have worked my land, tended my horses, watched the seasons change. Every night I have sat by this fire and felt the loneliness like a weight on my chest. And every night I have thought that somewhere out there was a woman feeling the same thing, waiting for something to change, waiting for someone to find her." He looked up and met Eleanor's eyes. "When I opened that door and saw you standing there, half frozen and lost in the storm, I knew you were the one I had been waiting for. I know it sounds like the ravings of a man gone mad from solitude, but I felt it as sure as I feel the warmth of this fire." Eleanor stared at him, her heart beating hard in her chest. She should have been frightened by his words, by the intensity in his eyes. Instead, she felt something shift inside her, like a key turning in a lock she had not known was there. "So have I," she whispered. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither of them fully understood yet. The man's expression softened, something vulnerable flickering across his weathered features. "My name is Nathan O'Brien," he said. "This is my land, 40 acres that I claimed 5 years ago." "It is not much, but it is mine. Eleanor Sutton." She pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "And I think you just saved my life, Nathan O'Brien." "The storm brought you here," Nathan said. "I just opened the door." Outside, the wind howled and shrieked, rattling the shutters and piling snow against the walls. Inside the small cabin, Eleanor and Nathan sat in the firelight and talked. They talked through the evening and into the night, their conversation flowing as naturally as water finding its course downhill. Nathan told her about his life before Wyoming. He had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 6 children. His father had been a farmer, his mother a schoolteacher. He had served in the Union Army during the war, though he did not speak much about those years beyond saying they had changed him. After the war, he had drifted west, working as a ranch hand and cow puncher until he had saved enough to claim his own land. Eleanor told him about Boston, about growing up in a proper house with proper manners and proper expectations. Her father had been a merchant, her mother a woman obsessed with social standing. They had wanted Eleanor to marry well, to secure an advantageous match that would elevate the family's position. Instead, Eleanor had refused proposal after proposal, unable to explain even to herself why each suitor left her feeling empty and restless. "They thought I was being difficult," Eleanor said, staring into her now empty coffee cup. "Maybe I was. But the thought of spending my life with any of those men felt like dying slowly. When my Aunt Martha's lawyer contacted me about the boarding house, my parents were horrified that I wanted to come claim it. They said I would be throwing my life away, moving to some backwater frontier town." "What made you come anyway?" Nathan asked. Eleanor looked up at him. "I wanted to feel alive. I wanted to wake up in the morning and feel like my life meant something more than attending tea parties and making polite conversation." "Does that sound foolish?" "No," Nathan said quietly. "It sounds brave." The wind continued its assault on the cabin through the night, but inside they were warm and safe. Nathan made soup from dried vegetables and venison jerky, simple but filling. Eleanor's clothes dried by the fire while she remained wrapped in blankets, her hair falling loose around her shoulders as it too dried in the warmth. She should have felt vulnerable, should have been frightened of this strange man in his isolated cabin. Instead, she felt safer than she had in years. There was something solid about Nathan, something fundamentally decent that showed in the careful way he moved around her, always keeping a respectful distance, always asking before doing anything that might affect her comfort. When her eyes began to grow heavy, Nathan stood and gathered more blankets from a chest against the wall. "You take the bed," he said. "I will sleep by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Eleanor protested. "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "You have been through an ordeal today. You need proper rest." Eleanor was too tired to argue further. She moved to the bed, still wrapped in her blankets, and lay down on top of the rough wool blanket that covered the mattress. Nathan banked the fire in the stove, then spread his own blankets on the floor near the fireplace. "Nathan," Eleanor said into the darkness. "Yes. Thank you for everything. Sleep, Eleanor. Tomorrow the storm will have passed and we will figure out what comes next." But as Eleanor drifted off to sleep, she found herself hoping that the storm would last just a little longer. Just enough time to understand this strange connection she felt to the man sleeping on the floor. Just enough time to explore the feeling of rightness that had settled over her the moment she stepped through his door. The storm did not last just one more day. It lasted 3 days of wind and snow that piled drifts higher than a man's head. 3 days trapped in the small cabin while the world outside turned into a frozen wilderness. 3 days that should have felt endless and claustrophobic, but instead passed like moments. On the first morning, Eleanor woke to find Nathan already up, the cabin warm and coffee brewing on the stove. Her clothes from the day before were folded neatly on the chair, completely dry. Nathan had been outside already to tend to the horses, his coat and hat still dusted with snow. "How bad is it out there?" Eleanor asked, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Bad. The snow is still coming down heavy and the wind has not let up. The horses are fine though, plenty of hay and water." Nathan poured coffee into 2 cups. "I hope you are not in a hurry to get back to Laramie. My aunt's boarding house has a manager who has been running it for years. He can handle a few more days without me." Eleanor accepted the coffee gratefully. "I should probably be more worried about being stuck here." "But you are not." Eleanor considered the question. She was alone in an isolated cabin with a man she had just met, cut off from the outside world by a blizzard. By all rights, she should have been terrified. Instead, she felt perfectly calm. "No," she said honestly, "I am not." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, warm and pleased. "Good. Because I am not worried either. Fact is, I cannot remember the last time I looked forward to the day ahead." They fell into an easy routine. Nathan taught Eleanor how to cook over the fire and the wood stove. Simple frontier meals that bore no resemblance to the elaborate dishes her mother's cook had prepared in Boston. Eleanor found she enjoyed it, the practical work of turning basic ingredients into something nourishing and good. They played cards with a worn deck Nathan produced from his trunk, and Eleanor discovered he was terrible at poker but excellent at whist. They talked about everything and nothing, swapping stories about their vastly different childhoods, debating the merits of various books they had both read, discussing the future of the territories, and whether Wyoming would ever become a state. "What made you choose this particular piece of land?" Eleanor asked on the second day. They were sitting at the table, Nathan whittling a new handle for a knife while Eleanor attempted to mend a tear in one of his shirts with materials from a sewing kit she found in his trunk. Nathan considered the question, his hands moving with practiced ease as he shaped the wood. "There is a creek that runs through the property, about a quarter mile from here. In the spring and summer it is the prettiest place you ever saw, with cottonwood trees and wildflowers all along the banks. The first time I saw it, I knew I wanted to build my life here. I could picture it all in my mind. A house, not just a cabin, but a real house, horses in the pasture, maybe cattle, a garden. Everything a man needs to make a good life." "It sounds beautiful," Eleanor said softly. "It is. Or it will be, once I have the time and money to build it all proper." He paused in his whittling. "What about you? What do you want your life to look like?" Eleanor set down the shirt she was mending and stared at the rough plank wall, trying to put her inchoate dreams into words. "I want to matter. I want to build something that helps people, that makes a difference. The boarding house could be that, I think. A place where travelers can find a clean bed and a hot meal, where new arrivals to the territory can stay while they get their bearings. Not just a business, but a real home for people who need one." "That is a good dream," Nathan said. "A worthy one. So is yours." Their eyes met across the table and held. In the lamplight, Nathan's face looked softer, younger. Eleanor felt her breath catch in her throat. The air in the cabin suddenly felt charged, electric with possibility. Nathan looked away first, turning his attention back to his whittling. "I should warn you, I am not much for fancy words or pretty speeches. Life out here, it makes a man direct, practical." "I like direct," Eleanor said. "I've had enough of pretty speeches to last a lifetime. In Boston, men said all the right things but never meant any of them. Every word was calculated, designed to impress or manipulate." "I mean what I say," Nathan told her. "Always have. So when I tell you that having you here these past 2 days has been the best 2 days I have had in longer than I can remember, I mean it true." Eleanor felt warmth bloom in her chest. When I tell you that I feel the same way, I mean it just as true. The wind howled outside, a reminder of the storm that had brought them together. Nathan set down his whittling and reached across the table. His hand lay palm up, an invitation, not a demand. Eleanor placed her hand in his and felt his fingers close around hers, calloused and strong and infinitely gentle. They sat like that until the fire burned low, hands joined, no words necessary. On the third day, the snow finally stopped falling. The wind died down to nothing and the sky cleared, revealing a sun so bright on the fresh snow it hurt to look at. Nathan went outside to assess the situation and came back shaking his head. The drifts are deep. It is going to take some digging to get the door fully clear and make a path to the barn. And even once we do that, traveling is going to be slow going for a few days yet, until the wind packs the snow down some. So I am still stuck here. Eleanor tried to keep the hope out of her voice. Nathan's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes gave him away. Looks like, unless you are anxious to get back to town. No, Eleanor said. I am not anxious at all. They spent the morning digging out, working together to clear paths from the cabin to the barn and the outhouse. It was hard physical labor, and Eleanor was not accustomed to it, but she refused to sit inside and watch Nathan work alone. He seemed surprised but pleased by her insistence on helping. By midday, they had cleared enough that the horses could be let out into the small corral to stretch their legs. Molly and Nathan's gelding, whose name Eleanor learned was Jasper, stood in the sun and rolled in the snow, clearly delighted by the change of scenery. Your mare is a good animal, Nathan observed, leaning on the corral fence beside Eleanor. Good bones, strong chest. She would make fine foals if bred to the right stallion. I bought her from a trader in Laramie right after I arrived. He said she was 5 years old and trail broken. That was the extent of my knowledge when I purchased her. Eleanor watched Molly play in the snow, her dark mane flying. I am not much of a horsewoman yet, I am afraid. In Boston we had a carriage and driver. You did well enough getting her here through the storm, Nathan said. That takes grit, keeping both yourself and your horse alive in conditions like that. A lot of folks would have panicked and made mistakes. Eleanor felt a rush of pride at his words. Coming from Nathan, who clearly knew the land and its dangers intimately, the praise meant something real. They went back inside when the cold started to seep through their coats. Eleanor made coffee while Nathan added wood to the fire. As she poured the steaming liquid into cups, Eleanor found herself watching him, studying the line of his shoulders, the way his hands moved with such confidence and competence. He was not a handsome man by Boston standards, where smooth sophistication was prized. But there was something compelling about him, something that drew her eye again and again. He looked up and caught her staring. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Nathan crossed the small cabin in 3 strides and stood before her, close enough that Eleanor had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I need to say something, he said, his voice rough. And you need to know I mean every word. Eleanor's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. All right. These 3 days with you have changed something in me. I know it is fast. I know by all rights we are still strangers, but Eleanor, I feel like I have known you my whole life. Like every choice I made, every road I took, it was all leading me to the moment I opened that door and saw you standing there. He reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle. I am a plain man with a small cabin on 40 acres of frontier land. I do not have much to offer, but what I have I would give to you gladly, my home, my protection, my future. Everything I am and everything I hope to be. Eleanor's eyes burned with sudden tears. Nathan, you do not have to answer now, he said quickly. You should go back to town, think about it proper. Take all the time you need, but I needed you to know. I needed to say it out loud before you left so there would be no doubt about how I feel. Eleanor reached up and covered his hands with her own. Do you remember what you said to me when I first arrived? You said you had been waiting, and do you remember what I said back? You said you had been waiting too. I meant it. Eleanor held his gaze, willing him to see the truth in her eyes. I have been waiting my entire life without even knowing what I was waiting for. But the moment I saw you, Nathan O'Brien, I knew. I felt it just as surely as you did. This sense of rightness, of finally being exactly where I am meant to be. Nathan's expression transformed, hope and joy and something deeper flooding across his weathered features. Eleanor, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I do not need time to think about it. I am saying that, yes, I want everything you just offered me. I want to build a life here with you. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to turn this cabin into a home and help you build those dreams of yours. I want it all, Nathan. With you. He pulled her close and kissed her, and Eleanor felt the last piece of herself click into place. This was what she had been missing in Boston, what all those proper suitors had failed to ignite in her. This sense of coming alive, of passion and purpose, and belonging all wrapped together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Eleanor Sutton. I know it is too soon to say it, but God help me, it is true. I love you too, Eleanor whispered. And it is not too soon. How can it be too soon when it feels like I have loved you forever? They stood wrapped in each other's arms while the afternoon light slanted through the cabin window, painting everything gold. Outside the world was frozen and white, but inside there was only warmth and the beginning of something beautiful. When Eleanor finally returned to Laramie 4 days after the storm, she did so as Nathan O'Brien's fiancée. The engagement happened the next morning after their declaration of love, a simple question asked over breakfast and answered with a yes that carried the weight of absolute certainty. Nathan had wanted to ride with her back to town, worried about her making the journey alone even though the weather had cleared and the snow had begun to settle. But Eleanor convinced him to stay and tend to his land, promising she would return as soon as she could get her affairs in order. I will be back within the week, she told him as she saddled Molly in the barn. I need to meet properly with Mr. Henderson, who has been managing the boarding house, look at the books, and see what needs to be arranged. Then I will come back here and we can be married in Laramie if that suits you. Nathan pulled her into his arms, heedless of the horse standing patiently beside them. Nothing would suit me more. But Eleanor, are you certain? Once we are married, there is no going back to Boston society. Life out here is hard. The winters are brutal, the summers are baking hot, and we will be working from dawn to dusk most days. I am certain, Eleanor said firmly. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The ride back to Laramie took most of the day, Molly moving carefully through the still deep snow. But the sky stayed clear, and the wind remained calm, and Eleanor's heart felt so full she thought it might burst. She kept replaying the past 4 days in her mind, marveling at how completely her life had changed. If someone had told her a week ago that she would fall in love with a cowboy in a storm-swept cabin, she would have laughed at the absurdity. But there was nothing absurd about what she felt for Nathan. It was as real and solid as the ground beneath Molly's hooves. Laramie was a rough frontier town of perhaps 2,000 souls, located in the southeastern corner of Wyoming Territory, along the path of the Union Pacific Railroad. The railroad's arrival 3 years earlier in 1868 had transformed the town from a dusty collection of shacks to a thriving hub of commerce and transportation. It was still rough around the edges, though, with more saloons than churches and wooden sidewalks that turned to rivers of mud when it rained. Eleanor's boarding house sat on a relatively quiet street 2 blocks from the main thoroughfare. It was a solid 2-story structure built of lumber hauled in by rail, with 6 guest rooms upstairs and common areas below. Her Aunt Martha had run it for 15 years, building a reputation for cleanliness and fair prices. Mr. Henderson, the manager, was a thin, nervous man in his 50s who met Eleanor at the door with obvious relief. "Miss Sutton, thank goodness you are back safely. When the storm hit and you did not return, I feared the worst." "I found shelter," Eleanor said, following him into the front parlor. "Mr. Henderson, I need to speak with you about some changes." Over the next hour, Eleanor laid out her plans. She would be getting married within the week, but she had no intention of abandoning the boarding house. Instead, she proposed a new arrangement where Henderson would continue as manager with increased authority and a percentage of the profits. Eleanor would remain the owner and would visit town regularly to oversee the larger decisions, but the day-to-day operations would be Henderson's responsibility. "Are you certain, Miss Sutton?" Henderson asked, clearly surprised by the generous terms. "This is very trusting of you." "My aunt trusted you for 15 years, Eleanor said. "I see no reason not to do the same. Besides, I will be living close enough to keep an eye on things." "Just not here in town." She spent the next 3 days settling her affairs, meeting with lawyers to finalize the arrangement with Henderson, purchasing supplies she would need for Nathan's cabin, and enduring a steady stream of curiosity from the other businesswomen in town who had heard about her upcoming marriage. Mrs. Harrington, who ran the general store, was particularly direct. "You are marrying Nathan O'Brien. Martha's niece from Boston is marrying a horse rancher who lives in a 1-room cabin 20 miles from town. My dear, are you certain you know what you are getting into?" Eleanor smiled serenely. "Quite certain, Mrs. Harrington. Thank you for your concern." On the 5th day, Eleanor loaded her purchases onto a rented wagon and rode back out to Nathan's land. She had been worried he might have second thoughts in her absence, that the intensity of their time together might fade once separated. But when she saw him ride out to meet her as she approached the cabin, the joy on his face erased all doubt. "You came back," he said, though it was not really a question. "Of course I came back. Did you think I would not?" Nathan dismounted and reached up to help her down from the wagon seat. Instead of setting her on her feet, he held her suspended in his arms, looking up at her with those storm-gray eyes. "I was afraid I might have dreamed the whole thing, that I would wake up and find myself alone again." Eleanor framed his face with her hands. "Not a dream. Real, all of it." He kissed her then, long and deep, and Eleanor felt the same fire that had burned between them in the cabin flare to life again. When he finally set her on her feet, they were both flushed and breathing hard. "We should probably wait until after the wedding for more of that," Nathan said, though his voice lacked conviction. Eleanor laughed. "Probably. Speaking of which, I made arrangements with the minister in Laramie for this Sunday if that suits you. I know it is fast, but I saw no reason to wait." "Sunday is perfect." Nathan began unloading the wagon, pausing when he saw the quantity of supplies Eleanor had brought. "What is all this?" "Fabric for curtains and a proper tablecloth. Some dishes that actually match, food supplies, books, a few other things I thought we might need." Eleanor pulled out a carefully wrapped package. "And this is for you, a wedding present." Nathan opened the package and stared at the contents, his expression unreadable. It was a watch, not fancy but well made, with his initials engraved on the back. "Eleanor, this is too much. I cannot accept something so fine." "Yes, you can. Every rancher needs a good watch." She touched his arm. "Nathan, I have money, not a fortune, but enough from my inheritance and the boarding house. I want to use it to help build our life together. Is that all right?" He looked from the watch to her face and back again. "It is more than all right, but I need you to know I will work every day to provide for you properly. I do not want you thinking you married a man who cannot take care of his wife. I think I married a man who loves me and who I love in return. The rest is just details we will figure out together." Sunday dawned clear and cold. Nathan and Eleanor rode into Laramie together in the early morning, both dressed in their best clothes. Nathan wore a new black suit that Eleanor had purchased for him in town, and Eleanor wore a simple cream-colored dress that she had owned since Boston, but had never found occasion to wear until now. The wedding was a small affair in the white clapboard church at the edge of town. Henderson was there, along with Mrs. Harrington and a few of the other business owners Eleanor had met. A handful of men who knew Nathan from his work as a horse trader stood in the back pews. The minister's wife played the organ, a cheerful if slightly off-key rendition of a hymn. Reverend Clark performed the ceremony with a kind smile and words about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of partnership in the hard frontier life. Eleanor barely heard them. She was too focused on Nathan standing beside her, his hand warm and solid around hers, his eyes never leaving her face. When the Reverend said, "You may kiss your bride," Nathan pulled Eleanor close and kissed her with a tenderness that made her throat tight with emotion. This was real. This was forever. This was the beginning of the life she had been waiting for. The small gathering moved to the boarding house dining room afterward for a simple meal that Henderson had arranged. Eleanor found herself surrounded by well-wishers, most of whom seemed genuinely happy for her, even if they thought she was crazy for choosing frontier life over Boston comfort. "Your aunt would have loved this," Henderson told her quietly as the party wound down. "She always hoped you would come west. She used to say you had too much spirit to waste on tea parties." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish she could have met Nathan. I think she would have approved. He is a good man, and those are rare out here." By late afternoon, Nathan and Eleanor were finally alone, riding back toward the cabin through the clear winter air. Eleanor rode Molly while Nathan drove the wagon loaded with Eleanor's belongings and wedding gifts. The sun was setting behind them, painting the snow-covered prairie in shades of pink and gold. "How are you feeling, Mrs. O'Brien?" Nathan asked, glancing over at her with a smile that made her heart skip. "Like the luckiest woman alive, Mr. O'Brien." When they reached the cabin, Nathan insisted on carrying Eleanor over the threshold despite her laughing protests that such traditions were foolish. "Maybe so," he said, holding her close, "but I only get to carry my bride into our home for the first time once. Let me enjoy it." Their wedding night was everything Eleanor had dreamed of, and nothing she could have anticipated. Nathan was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished even as passion built between them. Afterward they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Eleanor's head on Nathan's chest listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." Nathan's hand stroked her hair. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life." "It is not a sacrifice, Nathan. This is exactly what I want." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms while outside the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-filled above them. The winter months that followed their wedding were some of the hardest and happiest of Eleanor's life. She had not been lying when she told Nathan she wanted to work beside him to build their future, but she had also not fully understood what that would entail. Frontier life meant work from before sunup to after sundown. There was water to haul from the creek, wood to chop for the fire and stove, animals to tend, meals to prepare, clothes to wash and mend. In Boston, Eleanor had servants for all of these tasks. Here she had only her own 2 hands and determination. Nathan tried to take on the bulk of the heavy work, but Eleanor refused to be coddled. She learned to split wood, though her first attempt sent the axe flying dangerously off target until Nathan showed her the proper technique. She learned to recognize when the horses needed attention, when to give them extra hay against the cold, how to check their hooves for ice and stones. She learned to cook properly over the temperamental wood stove, producing meals that were plain but filling. Her hands grew rough and calloused. Her back ached most evenings. She went to bed exhausted and woke up tired, and she had never been happier, because alongside the hard work was Nathan. Nathan who kissed her each morning before they started their chores. Nathan who held her close at night and told her stories about his plans for expanding the ranch. Nathan who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Nathan who made her laugh with dry observations about the horses, or the weather, or the eccentric characters they encountered on their occasional trips to town. In early spring, Nathan began planning for how to expand the ranch. He wanted to build a proper house before the next winter, something bigger than the cabin with separate rooms and real glass windows. He also wanted to acquire more horses, build his reputation as a horse trader and breeder. The railroad has created steady demand for good working horses, he explained to Eleanor one evening as they pored over his carefully kept ledgers. Every ranch, every freight company, every stage line needs reliable mounts. If we can breed and train quality horses, we can build a real business. How many horses would we need to start? Eleanor asked. 6 good breeding mares and a quality stallion to start. I have Jasper, but he is a gelding. I would need to purchase a stud horse, which is not cheap. And then we need the mares, which means more money. All told, probably $800 to do it right. Eleanor bit her lip, thinking. The boarding house was turning a modest but steady profit. She had money saved from her inheritance. Between the 2 sources, $800 was possible, though it would take most of their savings. We have it, she said. Or we will buy summer if the boarding house continues doing as well as it has been. Nathan looked at her, his expression torn between hope and reluctance. Eleanor, that is your money, from your aunt and your hard work with the boarding house. I cannot ask you to risk it on horses. You are not asking, I am offering. We are partners, Nathan. Your dreams are my dreams now. She reached across the table and took his hand. Besides, I believe in you. I have watched you with the horses. You have a gift for understanding them, for bringing out the best in them. If anyone can make this work, it is you. What if I fail? What if something goes wrong and we lose everything? Then we will figure it out together. That is what marriage means. We take risks together, succeed together, fail together if it comes to that. Eleanor squeezed his hand. I trust you, Nathan. Do you trust yourself? He stared at their joined hands for a long moment, then looked up at her with eyes that blazed with determination. Yes, yes, I do. All right then. We are going into the horse business. That summer Nathan began building their new house. He hired 2 men from town to help with the heavy construction work, and the 3 of them labored through the long hot days to raise walls and install windows and frame out rooms. Eleanor worked alongside them when she could, and when she could not, she kept them all fed and watered, hauling buckets from the creek and preparing meals over a fire pit outside since the cabin was too hot for cooking. The house took shape slowly but surely. 2 stories, with 4 bedrooms upstairs and a large main room downstairs that would serve as kitchen and living space. Real wooden floors instead of rough planks. A covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. It was not fancy, but it was solid and spacious and beautiful. In August, Nathan traveled to Colorado to purchase horses. He took Eleanor with him despite her worry about the expense of 2 train tickets, insisting he wanted her input on the selection. They spent a week at her ranch outside of Denver, evaluating bloodlines and temperament, watching potential purchases be put through their paces. Eleanor discovered she had a good eye for horses. She could see things Nathan missed sometimes, subtle signs of nervousness or stubbornness that might cause problems later. Together, they selected 5 mares and a young stallion, all with excellent conformation and calm dispositions. "You have chosen well," the Colorado rancher told them as they finalized the purchase. "Those mares will throw strong foals, and that stud has good lines going back 3 generations. You will build a fine herd." Getting the horses back to Wyoming was an adventure that involved rail, cars, and teamsters, and one near disaster when the stallion tried to kick his way out of his stall. But finally, they arrived back at the ranch with their purchases, and Nathan's eyes shone with pride as he led the new horses into the expanded corral. "This is really happening," he said to Eleanor that night as they stood together watching the horses settle in. "We are really building something here." "Yes, we are." Eleanor leaned into his side, his arm coming around her shoulders automatically. "I am proud of you, of us. I could not have done any of this without you. You know that, right?" Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious. "The money, yes, but more than that. You believed in me. You made me believe in myself. You gave me a reason to dream bigger than just surviving." Eleanor reached up to touch his face, feeling the familiar scratch of his beard under her palm. "You gave me the same thing. A life with purpose and passion and love. Everything I never knew I needed." They kissed as the sun set behind them, the horses whinnying softly in the corral, the half-built house standing strong against the endless sky. By the time the first snow fell that November, the house was finished enough to move into. There was still trim work to complete and paint to apply, but the structure was sound and the wood stove installed, and the beds set up in the upstairs bedrooms. Nathan and Eleanor spent their first night in the new house lying in their own proper bed in their own proper bedroom, marveling at the luxury of space and privacy. "You ever miss it?" Nathan asked in the darkness. "Boston, I mean. Your old life." Eleanor considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss small things. Good coffee, bookstores, theater performances. But do I miss that life, the person I was there? No, never. That girl was half asleep, going through the motions of living without ever really feeling alive. This life, hard as it is, this is real, this matters. Even when your hands are chapped from cold and you are tired down to your bones, and we are eating venison stew for the 4th night in a row," Eleanor laughed. "Even then. Especially then, because it means we are building something together. Every callus on my hands is a mark of what we have accomplished. I am proud of those calluses." Nathan pulled her close, his lips finding hers in the dark. "Have I told you today that I love you? At least 3 times, but I never get tired of hearing it." "Good. Because I plan on telling you every day for the rest of our lives." The winter was milder than the previous year, for which Eleanor was profoundly grateful. The new house was significantly warmer than the cabin had been, and having proper rooms made the months of indoor time more bearable. Eleanor set up a small office in one of the downstairs rooms where she kept records for both the ranch and the boarding house, tracking expenses and profits with the careful attention to detail her merchant father had taught her. In February, Eleanor realized she had not had her monthly courses in nearly 3 months. At first, she attributed it to the hard physical work and the stress of settling into the new house. But as the weeks passed and other signs emerged, tender breasts and morning queasiness and a strange feeling of fullness in her belly, she began to suspect the truth. She waited another week to be certain before telling Nathan. They were having dinner, a rabbit stew that Eleanor had managed to make despite her unsettled stomach, when she decided the time was right. "Nathan, I need to tell you something." He looked up from his plate, instantly alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What is wrong? Are you sick?" "Not sick, pregnant." For a moment Nathan just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, transforming him. "Pregnant, you are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor, but yes, I am quite sure. I think the baby will come in late summer, probably August or early September." Nathan was out of his chair in an instant, pulling Eleanor up and into his arms. He held her tight, one hand sliding down to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." Eleanor laughed, feeling tears slide down her cheeks. "We are you happy?" "Happy, Eleanor, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can barely think straight." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you happy? Are you all right?" "I am wonderful. A little scared too, but mostly just excited. We are going to be parents, Nathan." "We are going to be parents," he repeated, as if testing the words. Then he laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Lord help this poor child. Between the two of us, it will probably be the most stubborn little thing Wyoming has ever seen." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, contemplating the new life they had created and the changes it would bring. The pregnancy was not easy. Eleanor's morning sickness lasted well into her 4th month, making cooking and even the smell of coffee nearly unbearable. She tired easily, needing to rest frequently during the day. As her belly grew, so did the aches in her back and legs, but Nathan was wonderful. He took over most of the heavy chores without complaint, insisting Eleanor rest more and work less. He brought her water when she was sick, rubbed her aching back in the evenings, and read to her from their small collection of books when she was too tired to do anything but lie in bed. "You should not have to do so much," Eleanor protested one evening as Nathan prepared their dinner while she sat at the table peeling potatoes, the one task she could manage. "This is not how marriage is supposed to work. The wife is supposed to take care of the home." "The wife is supposed to be growing our child," Nathan countered. "That seems like enough work to me. Besides, I do not recall either of us promising to follow all the supposed rules of how marriage works. We make our own rules." Dr. Morrison, the physician in Laramie, examined Eleanor in her 6th month and pronounced everything progressing normally. "You are healthy and strong, Mrs. O'Brien. The baby seems to be developing well. I see no reason to expect complications, though of course there are never guarantees with childbirth." "What should I do to prepare?" Eleanor asked. "Continue eating well, get plenty of rest, avoid heavy labor. When your time comes, send your husband to fetch me if you can. If not, well, women have been having babies for thousands of years. Trust your body to know what to do." As summer arrived and Eleanor's belly swelled larger, Nathan became increasingly protective. He did not want her riding anymore, barely wanted her walking to the creek. Eleanor found it simultaneously touching and frustrating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him after he tried to forbid her from hanging laundry on the line. "Women have been doing chores while pregnant since the beginning of time. Not my wife, not if I can help it." But he backed down when he saw the stubborn set of her jaw. "All right, hang your laundry, but I am staying right here in case you need help." In truth, Eleanor appreciated his concern even when she chafed against his restrictions. The summer heat was oppressive, and moving around with the extra weight of her pregnancy was exhausting. By late August, she was huge and uncomfortable, barely able to sleep at night, counting down the days until the baby would finally arrive. The labor started on a sweltering afternoon in early September. Eleanor was shelling peas on the porch when she felt the first contraction, a tightening across her belly that stole her breath. She sat very still, waiting. 20 minutes later, another one came. "Nathan," she called. He came around the corner of the house immediately, wiping his hands on his pants. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. But I think you should ride to town and fetch Dr. Morrison. The baby is coming." Nathan's face went pale. "Now, right now, babies do not wait for convenient timing. Go." "I will be fine until you get back." He hesitated, clearly torn between leaving her and fetching the doctor. Eleanor made shooing motions. "Go. I promise not to have this baby without you." Nathan saddled Jasper in record time and rode for town at a gallop. Eleanor went inside and began preparing, gathering the clean linens she had set aside for this purpose, lighting lamps even though it was still afternoon, boiling water on the stove, because that was what one did for births, even if she was not entirely sure why. The contractions continued, growing closer together and more intense. By the time Nathan returned with Dr. Morrison 2 hours later, Eleanor was pacing the downstairs room, breathing hard through each wave of pain. "How are you doing?" Dr. Morrison asked, setting down his medical bag. "I have been better," Eleanor admitted through gritted teeth. The labor lasted through the night and into the early hours of the next morning. It was the hardest thing Eleanor had ever endured, a marathon of pain and effort that seemed endless. Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement even when she screamed at him that this was all his fault. Finally, as the first light of dawn crept through the bedroom window, Dr. Morrison said, "One more push, Mrs. O'Brien. Give me one more good push." Eleanor bore down with the last reserves of her strength, and suddenly the pressure released and she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "You have a son," Dr. Morrison announced, holding up the squalling infant, "a healthy baby boy." Nathan was crying, tears streaming down his face as he stared at the tiny red-faced creature in the doctor's hands. Dr. Morrison cleaned the baby quickly and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Eleanor's arms. Eleanor looked down at her son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn the same gray as his father's. His tiny hand curled around Eleanor's finger with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed beside them, one arm around Eleanor and one finger gently stroking the baby's downy head. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe we made him." "What shall we name him?" Eleanor asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now Nathan looked at his son with an expression of wonder. "What about James, after my father, James O'Brien?" Eleanor tested the name and smiled. "It suits him. James it is, Doctor." Morrison packed up his instruments and gave Eleanor instructions for recovery and caring for the newborn. Nathan walked him out while Eleanor lay in bed with James in her arms, marveling at every tiny feature, counting his fingers and toes, breathing in his sweet baby smell. When Nathan returned, he climbed into bed beside them carefully, as if afraid he might break something. The three of them lay there as the sun rose higher, a family now, complete in a way Eleanor had never imagined possible. "Thank you," Nathan said softly. "For him, for this, for everything." "We made him together," Eleanor reminded him. "This is our miracle, Nathan. Ours. Little James O'Brien was a good baby, or as good as babies could be when they woke every 2 hours through the night demanding to be fed." Eleanor was exhausted those first few weeks, functioning on broken sleep and the adrenaline of new motherhood. But even in the depths of that exhaustion, watching Nathan hold their son with such tenderness and awe, she felt blessed beyond measure. Nathan took over even more of the ranch work, insisting Eleanor focus on healing and caring for James. He brought her meals in bed, changed diapers without complaint, and walked the floor with a screaming baby at 3 in the morning so Eleanor could sleep for precious hours. "You are good at this," Eleanor told him one evening, watching him cradle James against his shoulder, patting the baby's back to coax up a burp. "Being a father." "I am terrified most of the time that I am doing it wrong," Nathan admitted, "but I love him so much already. I would do anything for him, for both of you." As the weeks passed and Eleanor regained her strength, they settled into a new routine. Eleanor strapped James to her chest in a sling and went about her chores, the baby content to sleep against her as she worked. Nathan built a cradle that sat near the fireplace so James could be close by during the day. They took turns with night feedings, though Eleanor did most of them since she was nursing. By the time James was 3 months old, he was sleeping longer stretches at night and beginning to smile and coo at his parents. Eleanor felt like she was finally emerging from the fog of new parenthood into something more manageable. "We should take him to town," she suggested to Nathan one morning. "I need to check on the boarding house, and people have been asking to meet him." The trip to Laramie was an adventure with an infant. They had to stop twice to feed and change James, and Eleanor was constantly worried about him getting cold despite the blankets wrapped around him. But when they arrived and Eleanor carried her son into the boarding house, the delight on Mr. Henderson's face made it all worthwhile. "What a fine boy," Henderson said, peering at James, who stared back with solemn gray eyes. "He has your husband's look about him, Mrs. O'Brien." "Poor child," Eleanor joked, though in truth she loved that James favored Nathan. They spent the afternoon in town, showing off James to the various people Eleanor had come to know over the past year and a half. Mrs. Harrington at the general store was particularly taken with the baby, insisting on giving Eleanor free supplies of soap and talcum powder for the little one. On the ride back home, James fast asleep in Eleanor's arms, Nathan reached over and squeezed her hand. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "I am happy. Truly, completely happy. I have work I love, a wife I adore, and a son who is the best thing I ever helped create. I have everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible." "I feel the same way," Eleanor said softly. "Sometimes I think about that day the storm brought me to your door, and it feels like fate, like everything in our lives was leading to that moment." "The blizzard brought you to me," Nathan agreed. "And you brought me to life. I was existing before you, going through the motions, but you made me want to really live, to dream bigger, to build something lasting." They rode in comfortable silence the rest of the way home, their son sleeping peacefully between them, the setting sun painting the Wyoming sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. The years that followed were full of both challenges and joys. The horse breeding business grew steadily, with Nathan gaining a reputation for quality animals and fair dealing. By the time James was 2, they had a herd of 15 horses and regular buyers for their trained mounts. Eleanor continued to oversee the boarding house, making the trip to Laramie every few weeks to review the books with Mr. Henderson and ensure everything was running smoothly. The business remained profitable, providing a steady income that complemented the ranch. When James was 3, Eleanor found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was not trying to do as much physical labor. Their daughter was born in the spring, a red-faced, screaming bundle of energy they named Sarah after Eleanor's mother. Sarah was different from James from the start. Where James had been a calm baby content to observe the world around him, Sarah demanded attention constantly. She cried louder, wanted to be held more, and from the moment she could move was constantly getting into everything. "She is going to be a handful," Nathan said with a mixture of exasperation and pride as they watched 18-month-old Sarah toddle after the barn cats with single-minded determination. "She takes after her father," Eleanor teased. "Stubborn and determined." "She takes after her mother," Nathan countered. "Brave and fearless, sometimes to the point of recklessness." "Fair point." Eleanor laughed as Sarah lost her balance and plopped down on her bottom, then immediately got back up and continued her pursuit of the cats. With 2 children, life was busier but also richer. James proved to be a thoughtful, serious child who loved helping Nathan with the horses and listening to Eleanor read stories. Sarah was all energy and emotion, throwing spectacular tantrums one moment and giving crushing hugs the next. The ranch continued to prosper. Nathan hired a part-time hand to help with the work, a young man named Tom who lived in town but came out 3 days a week to help with training and care of the horses. This freed up more of Nathan's time to focus on the business aspects and to spend with his family. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Eleanor with a trip to Denver, just the 2 of them. They left the children with Mr. Henderson and his wife, who had become close friends over the years. It was strange and wonderful to be just the 2 of them again, walking the streets of Denver hand in hand, staying in a real hotel, eating in restaurants. "You miss this?" Nathan asked as they sat in a theater watching a play, something Eleanor had not done since leaving Boston. City life, culture, entertainment, Eleanor considered the question as she had so many times over the years. "I enjoy visiting, but I do not miss it. My life is with you on our ranch with our children. That is where I belong. No regrets." Nathan's voice was quiet, serious. "Not a single one." Eleanor turned to look at him in the dim theater light. "You are still the best decision I ever made, Nathan O'Brien. That has not changed." He kissed her right there in the theater, and Eleanor felt the same flutter in her stomach she had felt when he first kissed her 6 years ago in the cabin during the blizzard. When James was 7 and Sarah 4, Eleanor realized she was pregnant for the 3rd time. This pregnancy was harder on her body, perhaps because she was older now at 30, or perhaps simply because chasing 2 active children while growing a 3rd took more out of her. This time the baby came early, in the middle of winter during a minor storm that was nothing compared to the blizzard that had brought Eleanor to Nathan, but still enough to make the roads difficult. Dr. Morrison almost did not make it in time, arriving just as Eleanor entered the hardest part of labor. Their 2nd son was smaller than James had been, arriving a full month before his due date. But he was healthy and loud, making his displeasure at entering the cold world very clear with powerful lungs. "What about Thomas?" Nathan suggested, holding his new son while Eleanor rested. "After your father." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Her relationship with her parents had been strained after she moved west, limited to occasional letters that were polite but distant. Naming their son after her father felt like a bridge, a way to honor where she came from even if she had chosen a different path. "Thomas O'Brien," she said. "Yes." "That is perfect." The years continued to unfold, each bringing new joys and challenges. James grew into a thoughtful young man who loved working with the horses just as his father did. Sarah remained a whirlwind of energy, fearless and opinionated. Thomas was the peacemaker, the one who could calm Sarah's tantrums and draw James out of his serious moods. The horse breeding business became one of the most respected in the territory. Nathan's horses were known for their intelligence, stamina, and even temperament. He hired 2 full-time hands and built a second barn to accommodate the growing herd. Eleanor expanded her involvement with the boarding house, working with Henderson to add 4 more rooms and improve the furnishings. They also opened a small restaurant on the ground floor, serving meals to travelers and locals alike. The business thrived, and Eleanor found she had a real talent for the hospitality industry. On a warm summer evening when Eleanor was 35 and Nathan 42, they sat on the porch of their house watching their 3 children play in the yard. James was 15 now, tall and lean like his father. Sarah was 12, all long limbs and fierce determination. Thomas was 8, still small for his age but with a smile that could light up a room. "Can you believe we built all this?" Eleanor asked, leaning her head on Nathan's shoulder. "Sometimes I still feel like that half-frozen woman pounding on your door in the middle of a blizzard. And I am still the lonely cowboy who opened that door and found everything he had been waiting for." Nathan put his arm around her. 16 years, Eleanor. 16 years, and I love you more now than I did on our wedding day." "How is that possible? You told me you loved me completely then." "I did. But love is not a fixed thing. It grows and changes. Every challenge we have faced together, every joy we have shared, it all adds layers. We are not the same people who married in that little church in Laramie. We have grown together, built a life together. That creates a different kind of love, deeper, stronger." Eleanor turned to kiss him, ignoring the exaggerated gagging sound Sarah made from the yard. "You have gotten very eloquent in your old age, Mr. O'Brien." "I have had good motivation, Mrs. O'Brien." They watched their children play until the sun set and the stars began to emerge. Sarah chased Thomas around the yard while James sat on the fence watching them with the patient amusement of an older sibling. The horses moved peacefully in their pasture. Smoke rose from the chimney of their home, carrying the smell of the stew Eleanor had left simmering on the stove. It was not a perfect life. There were hard years when drought killed the grass and they had to buy expensive hay to feed the horses. There were injuries, close calls, childhood illnesses that left Eleanor pacing the floor all night in worry. There were arguments and disagreements, moments when the stress of running a ranch and raising children felt overwhelming. But it was a good life. A life built on love and partnership and shared dreams. Every morning, Eleanor woke up next to the man she loved. Every day, she worked toward goals that mattered. Every night, she tucked her children into bed and felt blessed beyond measure. In the summer of 1888, Wyoming was on the verge of statehood. The territory had grown and matured, with law and order replacing much of the rough frontier chaos. Laramie had become a proper town with schools and churches and civic organizations. James announced at dinner one evening that he wanted to go to the new university that had opened in Laramie. "They have an agricultural program," he explained. "I could learn about scientific breeding practices, new techniques for training. It would help the ranch." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Eleanor knew what he was thinking. James was 17 now, nearly a man. It was time to start thinking about his future. But the idea of their oldest child leaving home, even for education, was hard. "That is a good plan," Nathan finally said. "Your mother and I will support whatever you decide. But you need to know that this ranch will be yours someday if you want it. Everything we have built, it is for you and your brother and sister." "I know, Pa, and I do want it. That is why I want to learn more so I can help make it even better." Eleanor felt tears threaten but blinked them back. Her son was growing up, becoming his own man. It was what she wanted for him, even though it hurt to think of him leaving. Sarah, on the other hand, announced that she had no interest in ranching. "I am going to be a doctor," she declared with all the confidence of a 14-year-old who believed anything was possible. A doctor? Nathan looked surprised. That is ambitious. Why should not I be a doctor? Dr. Morrison says I am smart and have a good temperament for it. And women can be doctors now. There are medical schools that accept women. Eleanor and Nathan exchanged glances. The world was changing, offering opportunities to their daughter that Eleanor could never have dreamed of at the same age. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. If you want to be a doctor, then you should be a doctor, Eleanor said firmly. We will find a way to make it happen. Thomas, at 11, just shrugged when asked about his future. I do not know yet. Maybe I will work the ranch with James. Maybe I will do something else. Can I be excused? Tom said he would teach me to rope today. After the children left the table, Eleanor and Nathan sat in silence for a moment. They are growing up, Eleanor said unnecessarily. They are. And we did good, Eleanor. All three of them are strong and smart and kind. They are going to be fine. I know, but that does not make it easier to think about them leaving. Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. They will leave, but they will also come back. We have given them roots and wings. That is all any parent can do. In the fall of 1889, James started at the university. He came home on weekends when he could, full of stories about his classes and the new techniques he was learning. Sarah threw herself into her studies with renewed determination, preparing for the day she too would leave for medical school. Thomas, now 12, had revealed a talent for woodworking. He spent hours in the workshop Nathan had built, crafting everything from simple boxes to intricate furniture. I like making things, he explained when Eleanor asked about it. Seeing something go from just wood to something useful and beautiful. The ranch continued to prosper. Nathan and James began experimenting with some of the new breeding techniques James was learning about, carefully selecting bloodlines to emphasize specific traits. Their horses became even more sought after, with buyers coming from as far away as Colorado and Montana. The boarding house had grown into one of the most successful businesses in Laramie. Eleanor had turned over most of the day-to-day management to Mr. Henderson's son, who had taken over when his father retired. But she still reviewed the books and made the major decisions, enjoying the challenge of the business side of things. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan gave Eleanor a beautiful mare, a gray with dappled flanks and intelligent eyes. I thought it was time you had a horse of your own again, he said. Molly has earned her retirement. Eleanor ran her hands over the mare's silky coat. She is beautiful. What is her name? That is for you to decide. She is yours. Blizzard, Eleanor said immediately. Her name is Blizzard. Because a blizzard brought me to you, and she will carry me forward into whatever comes next. Nathan smiled and pulled her close. I like that. Blizzard it is. They rode together that afternoon, just the two of them, racing across the prairie under a brilliant blue sky. Eleanor felt young again, free, with the wind in her hair and the powerful animal beneath her. When they finally stopped to rest the horses by the creek, Nathan pulled Eleanor down from her saddle and into his arms. 20 years, he said, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So would I, Eleanor agreed. Every single moment. They made love there by the creek in the warm afternoon sun, as passionate and connected as they had been as newlyweds. Afterward they lay in the grass, Eleanor's head on Nathan's chest, and talked about their life, their children, their dreams for the future. I want to build something that lasts beyond us, Nathan said. Not just a ranch that disappears when we are gone, but a legacy. Something James and Thomas can pass down to their children and their children's children. A place with a reputation, a name that means something. We have already built that, Eleanor said. The O'Brien Ranch is known across the territory. Your horses are famous, but I understand what you mean. You want it to continue to grow. Yes, And I want the same for you with the boarding house. That is your legacy, Eleanor. The place you created, the business you built. That should continue too. Mr. Henderson's son is more than capable. And when the time comes, we can arrange for it to pass to Sarah if she wants it. Or if she chooses to pursue medicine instead, we can sell it and use the money to support whatever our children need. They talked until the sun began to set, planning and dreaming just as they had in the early days of their marriage. The details were different now, focused on legacy and future generations rather than immediate survival. But the partnership was the same, the sense that together they could accomplish anything. In the spring of 1890, Wyoming achieved statehood. There were celebrations throughout the territory, now officially the 44th state. Laramie hosted a massive party with speeches and fireworks and dancing in the streets. The whole O'Brien family attended, proud to be part of this historic moment. Things are going to change now, James observed as they watched the fireworks explode over the town. He was 19 now, in his second year at the university, already taller than his father and filled with ideas about the future of ranching in the new state. Change is not always bad, Nathan said. Your mother and I have seen a lot of change in the 20 years we have been here. Most of it has been good. Some of it has been hard, though, Eleanor added. The key is staying flexible, being willing to adapt while holding on to what matters most. Sarah, now 16 and applying to medical schools back east, nodded seriously. I am going to miss Wyoming when I leave. But I will come back. This is home, even if I need to go away for a while to learn. And we will be here waiting when you return, Eleanor assured her. Always. Thomas, now 13 and hitting a growth spurt that was turning him from boy to young man seemingly overnight, just grinned. I am never leaving. I like it here. Plus someone needs to stay and help Pa with the ranch when James goes off to revolutionize horse breeding or whatever grand plans he is cooking up. They all laughed, a family bound together not just by blood but by choice and love and shared history. The years continued their steady march. James graduated from university and returned to the ranch full-time, implementing his new knowledge and expanding the operation further. Sarah was accepted to a medical school in Philadelphia, becoming one of the few women in her class. Thomas took over the business side of the ranch, discovering he had a gift for managing finances and negotiating deals. Eleanor and Nathan grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But their love remained as strong as ever. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, still rode together across the prairie, still found joy in each other's company after more than a quarter-century of marriage. In 1898, James married a woman named Catherine, who had come west from Ohio to work as a teacher. The wedding was held on the ranch, with half of Laramie in attendance. Eleanor watched her son pledge his life to his bride and felt the beautiful ache of time passing, of cycles continuing. A year later, James and Catherine welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor after her grandmother. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Eleanor O'Brien felt the circle complete. She had come west as a lost young woman in a blizzard. She had found love and purpose and family. And now that family was growing, spreading roots deeper into the Wyoming soil. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, coming to stand beside her as she held baby Eleanor. "I am thinking about that day," Eleanor said softly. "The day the blizzard brought me to your door. How different my life might have been if I had turned a different direction, if I had never found your cabin." "But you did find it," Nathan reminded her. "You found me and I found you, and we built all of this together. I have been so happy, Nathan, so incredibly happy. Thank you for opening that door. Thank you for being on the other side of it." He put his arm around her shoulders, and together they looked down at their granddaughter, the newest generation of the family they had created. Sarah came home from medical school that summer, now Dr. Sarah O'Brien, one of only a handful of women doctors in the entire country. She had plans to open a practice in Laramie, bringing modern medical care to the town and surrounding ranches. "I learned so much back east," she told her parents over dinner her first night home. "But I realized that this is where I am needed most. There are plenty of doctors in Philadelphia. Here I can actually make a difference." "We are proud of you," Eleanor said. "So proud. You took a dream and made it real through hard work and determination." Thomas, now 23, had expanded the ranch's operations to include a lumber mill on the property, utilizing the trees that grew along the creek. He had also gotten involved in local politics, serving on the town council and advocating for better roads and schools. On a warm evening in the summer of 1900, Eleanor and Nathan sat on their porch watching the sun set. They were both in their 50s now, their children grown, their grandchildren playing in the yard. 3 generations of O'Briens, all thriving on the land they had claimed and loved. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not gotten lost in that storm?" Eleanor asked. "Every now and then," Nathan admitted, "but I cannot imagine any other life. This is what was meant to be. You and me, this ranch, our family, all of it." "I have been thinking about that day a lot lately," Eleanor said. "How scared I was, how certain I was going to die. And then I saw your cabin and you opened the door and said the strangest thing." "I said I had been waiting," Nathan remembered. "And you said you had been waiting too." "Did you know then? In that moment, did you know we would end up here?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "I knew something. I knew you were important, that your arrival meant something more than just a lost traveler seeking shelter." "Did I know we would fall in love, get married, raise 3 children and build a ranch and grow old together? No. But I felt the possibility of it, the potential for everything we have become." "So have I," Eleanor said, echoing the words she had spoken to him that first night. "I felt it then, and I feel it now. This sense of rightness, of being exactly where I am meant to be with exactly who I am meant to be with." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the stars began to emerge. From inside the house came the sounds of their family, James and Catherine getting their children ready for bed, Thomas and Sarah arguing good-naturedly about something, the daily music of people who loved each other living their lives together. "I love you, Eleanor O'Brien," Nathan said. "I have loved you since the day a blizzard brought you to my door. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Nathan O'Brien. You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, you and this life we built together." Nathan took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture as familiar as breathing. They had held hands like this thousands of times over the decades, in times of joy and times of sorrow, in moments of passion and moments of simple contentment. Their hands fit together perfectly, 2 pieces of a whole. As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Eleanor thought about the young woman she had been, riding through a blizzard with death nipping at her heels. That woman had been brave but uncertain, knowing she wanted something different from her life, but not sure what or how to find it. She had found it in a lonely cabin on the Wyoming prairie, in the form of a cowboy who had been waiting for someone to share his dreams with. Together they had built something beautiful and lasting. Together they had created not just a life but a legacy. The blizzard had brought her to his door, but love had made her stay. Love had given them children and grandchildren, had seen them through hard times and celebrated with them in good times. Love had been the foundation of everything they had built, and that love would continue, Eleanor knew, long after she and Nathan were gone. It would live on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch they had created and the community they had served. Every horse that bore the O'Brien brand, every patient Sarah treated, every piece of furniture Thomas crafted, every innovation James implemented would be a testament to the love that had started it all. "What are you smiling about?" Nathan asked, seeing the expression on her face in the starlight. "Everything," Eleanor said simply. "I am smiling about everything, our whole beautiful life." Nathan raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "It has been beautiful, hasn't it? Even the hard parts, because we faced them together." "Especially the hard parts," Eleanor agreed. "Those are what made us stronger." They sat on the porch until late into the night, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something magnificent together. The Wyoming sky stretched endless above them, full of stars and possibility. The land around them was the land they had claimed and cultivated and loved. The house behind them was full of family and warmth and laughter. It was everything they had dreamed of that first night in the cabin during the blizzard. It was more than they had dared to hope for. It was, quite simply, perfect. And when they finally went inside and climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving with the practiced ease of decades together, Eleanor felt the same flutter of excitement she had felt as a bride. Nathan was still the man she wanted beside her every night. Their love had not dimmed or faded with time. Instead, it had deepened and matured, becoming something rich and complex and absolutely essential. They lay in bed together, Eleanor's head on Nathan's shoulder, his arm around her waist, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as their hands did. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods by the creek. A coyote called in the distance. The familiar sounds of the Wyoming night, sounds that had been the soundtrack of their lives together. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Nathan asked. "For waiting. For opening the door. For loving me. For this whole beautiful life. Thank you for being worth waiting for having the courage to step through that door, for choosing me and this life, for making every day an adventure." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found their perfect match in the most unlikely of circumstances. The blizzard that could have killed Eleanor had instead brought her to exactly where she needed to be. To love, to home, to the life she had been seeking without even knowing it existed, and in the morning they would wake up and do it all again. Feed the horses, make breakfast, work the land, love each other. Day after day, year after year, building their legacy one moment at a time. It was a simple life in many ways, but it was everything that mattered. It was home. It was family. It was love that had endured through decades and would endure beyond their lifetimes, living on in the children and grandchildren and generations yet to come. The blizzard had brought her to his lonely door. The cowboy had said, "I have been waiting." And she had said, "So have I." Those simple words had been the beginning of everything, the first page of a story that was still being written with each passing day, and what a story it had been.